Hello, this is the voice of WillPods. Unfortunately, there were some technical issues with this show's audio. My human has done his best to fix them in the edit, but he is new and not very able. Please accept my apology, and I hope you can still enjoy the show.
Hi, and welcome to the Why I Love podcast, and this episode is all about Robot Wars. So for those of you who've not seen the show, the basic premise is that there's these teams of people who build these remote control robots. Basically put them in an arena and they have to fight each other. And that's pretty much it. I mean, there's rounds and there's rules and there's things like that. And the idea is that at the end of each episode there's a winner, and the winner goes on to the last episode. It's sort of like a grand finale, and they'll all battle again to find out who's the best from that series. But really, a lot of this podcast, it's not going to be about the actual matches themselves. Some of that is interesting, don't get me wrong. I mean, just a show about robots fighting each other would be good anyway. But what I love about Robot Wars is actually all the other weird stuff that is so much harder to explain, really, and it's not something I'd ever really understood that I loved until I kind of took a deeper look at it today for this podcast. And I think something that's really weird as well is that a lot of what I love about the show now is similar things to when I was a kid, but why I love those things has totally changed. So things that I thought were maybe quite cool as a kid, I've just totally changed around on now, and now they're just like really funny, or they're kind of interesting because they're so strange. I mean, the show itself is just completely kind of stuck in the 90s, which is a good thing. I think they've brought it back mainly for people my age, and they've kept all that nostalgia, and they've kept all the same kind of layout and the same fonts and the same music, but it's so trapped in that 90s vision that, you know, everything is so over the top. Every time they describe the arena, they have to talk about the bulletproof glass, and every time the pit is activated, you know, it's not just a pit now, it's the pit of oblivion. And there's a really weird obsession in it with like motor speeds and technical things that nobody really cares about, but it all just adds to this strange kind of geek factor of the show. And it is just a show for nerds, really. I mean, talking about the engine sizes to the rev speeds of weapons to even like the presenter. I mean, they've had a couple, but the main one in the past was always Craig Charles, who obviously was famous for Red Dwarf, which again, it's more nerd culture. And then you get the people themselves. No one cool has ever appeared on this show, let's put it that way. But they're all amazing. I love them all. You get these teams of people who... So there used to be a team who were like a team of sort of 50-year-old bikers who would show up in full leathers, and they would even have a song about their robot. And then you get nerdy science people, you get uni students who are doing like engineering and design degrees, you get teams of like dads and sons. I mean, on today's episode there was just a team of women from Holland who just came over just to have a go. I mean, it's a really diverse crowd, and it isn't just the kind of people that's really different, it's also the amount of money they have to spend on the robots and the amount of design that goes into it. So some of these teams are really quite professional. The robots look incredible, and they spent a lot of money designing them. They run like full-on engineering tests on them to make sure they're all running okay, and then going up against them might just be like a team of kids who built a robot with their mum and dad. And yet what's fantastic about this show is, if it was a sport, it would kind of be like the FA Cup. I mean, you can never guarantee who's going to win, because you could have the most over-engineered thing and go in there with all these, you know, amazing weapons and amazing techniques, all these things that can help, but at the end of the day, you know, a screw can come loose, or you can just get knocked in the wrong place and your antenna breaks, or something happens that means that your robot suddenly can only drive in circles, or it can just be as simple as somebody's a better driver than you. So you might have all the money and all the technology, but actually they might just outdrive you and knock you into a pit. And that just kind of makes every fight interesting, because you can never guarantee what's going to happen. Sure, there's robots that are better than others, but it doesn't mean they're automatically going to win. And you see that every week. You see robots that you think, well, there's no way they're going to lose. Or you see some that show up and you're almost laughing at at them before they've begun, because they've just built something that's so bizarre that it looks like it couldn't even sort of drive forwards, let alone fight a robot. And yet somehow it might make it through quite a few rounds and get to a final, and suddenly people are starting to notice it. So it's great that there's such a mix of characters sort of driving these robots, and the people on it are hilarious as well. Just on one of the ones I watched today, there was a grown man who got beaten by some little kids, and he stormed out of the interview, and some of them take it so seriously, and that's what I love about this now. It's just hilarious to think about who these people are, what their real lives are like, that they're taking the show so seriously, and I mean, I get it, they've probably spent a lot of money on this robot and spent a lot of time making it, but it's hilarious, like, to watch. Some of the people show up in these, like, funny furry jackets, and they're just completely there to have a laugh. And then you get ones who are, like, deadly serious, and you'll see them during the match, like, yelling at each other and coordinating really carefully and doing all this, and then there'll be, like, a 9-year-old driving one of the robots who just demolishes people. And I think the show sort of encourages a lot of this as well. There's definitely a kind of pit drama element to the show. So the pits are basically the back room, the bit where all the robots are engineered and fixed up during the matches. And we'll always go back there to do little interviews and stuff with the teams to see how the robots are getting on, to introduce you to what a new robot is like and what weapons it has and things. Towards the middle of the show especially, they always really build up this pit drama. They'll have competition going on, people maybe spying on each other, or sometimes it's friendly as well. You get that kind of bake-off thing where teams sort of help each other out, and if one knows they've probably lost, they'll maybe lend some parts to another team. But you get all this stuff where they, or will they make it in time? This part's broken and the clock's ticking, and it really builds up. And they try to build up tension as well by maybe, leaving you on a little cliffhanger. So will they have time to fix this weapon, or the weapon, we'll have to find out as the match begins whether their engine's still working or not. And again, at the time, as a kid, I really got into all that, and it does have it kind of reminds me of wrestling a little bit. It has that thing where when you were young, you were maybe sort of drawn in by all this drama, and it was really cool, and you really believed sort of the soap opera side of it. But then as an adult, it's also got an appeal because it's just interesting to watch. Like, it's a bizarre kind of technique for a TV show. But outside of the people and the pit drama and all that, the actual fights themselves are really fun to watch. And one of the things I just absolutely love about this show is, like, the first time you see something new. I always remember the first time I saw a Shreemech. Now, a Shreemech stands for self-righting mechanism, and it's basically just having something on your robot that means if you get flipped upside down, you can turn yourself back up the right way. Now, this might seem really obvious, and if you watch it now, almost every robot has this. But in the first couple of series, this just wasn't a thing at all, and a lot of the time, people won simply by flipping a robot on its back and it being immobilized. And then came along this robot called Cassius, which they hadn't really talked about the fact that it could do this. It had a flipper on it, so basically a big thing that kind of flips up and fires robots to turn them upside down. And this was back in the days where there was the gauntlets. I can't remember exactly what happened, but somehow it ended up getting flipped on its back. And at that point, you were just thinking, okay, so this is over, like, eliminated, this is what happens every time somebody's stuck on the back. And then suddenly, it launched its flipper, and the flipper flipped it right up into the air. And I don't know exactly how many, but in my head I see it as sort of doing like 3 or 4 flips whilst it was in the air, and then landing on its wheels. And I was just blown away. Suddenly the game had changed, and I think that is something brilliant about Robot Wars that you don't get in another sport really. Like with football, sure, you might see like a really cool trick every so often that you've never seen, but with Robot Wars there's always these firsts. So like there was the thing with the Shreemech, and then a big one for people was a robot called Hypnodisc, which was like the first spinner robot. So a spinner is just basically a really big disc with a blade on it that spins at stupid speeds. And these things are amazing to watch because when they hit a robot, they shred it to bits. And this hadn't been done before. I mean, at the start of the show, we're talking the first series, the winner was basically a ramp that just sort of drove into people. And 4 or 5 series on, you've got these robots that are just tearing each other to bits. And to see that was so exciting. The first time that spinner revved up and you were waiting for it to hit because you'd heard from the commentator, you know, how powerful this was. And when it hit them and metal just flew off everywhere, I mean, it's brilliant. Those firsts in this are so good. The first time you see a robot get flipped out of the arena, I mean, who knew that was a thing? And then it happened, and now again, it happens like most episodes, but there's this weird evolution with the show, where more and more things, the weapons get more powerful, the robots get better, faster, easier to control. They have these incredible weapons, and then you've got people kind of evolving to defend against these new weapons. So for example, with the Shremek, that was basically a defense against these sort of ramp robots and flipper robots that were turning everybody upside down. Now suddenly that's everywhere. Everyone can self-right. But now also people are kind of, you know, designing the robots so it's much harder to get underneath them to flip them. Or they've got curved armor in a way that kind of deflects spinner robots, or they try to break the spinners so that they can't get to the full speed to do the damage in the first place. And it's just amazing to be watching something that is always evolving with each series, and you're always wondering where it's going to go next. But yeah, I think that's what I really just love about the show, is this idea that it's constantly evolving. And I think they'll probably do another couple of series at least with these presenters. But I quite like the idea of Robot Wars being this show that sort of does 4 or 5 series and then just vanishes again. Goes away for 10 years and comes back, and whether they could keep coming back with the same aesthetic and the same bizarreness, I don't know. I love it, but I'm not sure if that would work again in another 10 years or another 20 years, but I think the potential for the evolution really of the robots, that's the key thing, and that's why I would keep coming back to it. We're seeing more and more in the news every day about self-driving cars, about robots evolving that can do certain tasks, think for themselves, do these incredible things, you know. And I wonder in 10 years will we see a Robot Wars where there's no remote controls and this is AI fighters, and you know, I don't think it could come too soon, because I think that technology is just too pricey and too high tech right now for the general public. But in another 10 years time, I mean, I think we really could see like a version of this where AI robots are fighting each other to the death. And that's horribly sci-fi, but I would definitely tune in to watch.
Humans replace the dinosaurs, but the next stage of evolution's Robot Wars.